in committee for consideration of the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman.
Point of order, Joe Goodhue.
Mr. Chair, I seek leave for the bill to be taken as one question and for members to have unlimited calls.
Leave is sought for that purpose. Is there any objection? There is no objection. So the House and Committee on the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Bill, the question is that parts 1 and 2, schedules 1 and 2 and clauses 1 and 2 stand part. The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I don't intend taking a lot of time at this point, but we'll speak again during the process of this committee stage. I just wanted to indicate that there is a document that's been provided to parties indicating the government's position on a number of recommendations that came through from the Select Committee. This is in addition to a number of recommendations previously considered that were supplied by the Labor Party prior to the Select Committee process. I know that there are other SOPs coming from members this afternoon, and the Minister's SOP that gives life to the agreed parts of the documents being provided will be with the House as soon as possible. Officials are working on it at the moment. We are some minutes ahead of where I thought we might be at this stage. There's no intention to try and slow that process. That SOP needs to be properly written, and that's why this document has been provided to give those early indications.
I call the Honourable Member Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I had the opportunity to sit on the Local Government and Environment Committee over the past couple of days as it fulfilled its task as it was required to do by the House on Tuesday to hear evidence on the bill. And I want to make a couple of points in what I take it will be a wide-ranging debate, given that all the parts of the bill are being heard and debated together. So the first point is to agree with an observation that was made by Amy Adams in the second reading speech, which is that she is quite correct. Members on this side do agree that the Canterbury situation calls for emergency powers, and that's made crystal clear in the minority view set out by the committee and reported back to the House. Where members on this side differ from members of the government is in the following ways. We don't believe that this process merits urgency. We don't believe that the Minister requires powers beyond the reach of the courts. We don't believe that the ordinary rights of New Zealanders to have recourse to the courts by way of appeal need to be abridged. And we don't agree that the powers of Parliament, in particular to extend laws, should just be delegated to the executive, particularly not this executive. That is an unnecessary usurpation of the role of Parliament. It's unconstitutional. It shouldn't have been done after the September earthquake, but it was. And we've just heard Nikki Kay in her first interjection during this debate. Let's hope the future interjections, if there are any. Oh, I'm sorry. It was one of the generic members on the other side. It was actually Nikki Wagner. And my apologies for the confusion, but sometimes they do all blur into one. She said, "You voted for it." Well, Ms Wagner, we voted for it because we do believe that we need to get on, as has been said, and deal with the emergency in Canterbury. But that doesn't mean that we need to effectively elect a dictatorship to do it. And the problem that's going to happen when people look back at the way that this Parliament has dealt with this situation is the problem that is applied to all attempts at dictatorship. It looks like a great idea to make the trains run on time at the point at which the attempt is made, but the precedent is incredibly regrettable. And the precedent is the one that we are going to come in this. Amy Adams should know this. She's got a law degree. Maybe she slept through the constitutional law section of that degree, but the reality is it doesn't pay to disturb constitutional arrangements. We are acting at haste and we will repent at leisure. And I am putting that on the record now so it's crystal clear as to what the Labour Party's position is. And sir, if there had been proper process around this legislation, in fact we would have a better bill. It would reflect better practice, better international practice around recovery. There would be a Crown entity in place, not one completely amenable to the control and direction of the Minister. There'd be much better provisions around collaboration with the community, the sort of things that are paid lip service to by members opposite, but which they don't plainly mean, given the provisions of this bill. Now, the Minister's just told us that there's a 21-page summary that's been made available to us. It contains his decisions around which recommendations by the submitters to the Select Committee are to be accepted and which are not. And I want to be fair in paying tribute to the Minister for taking that exercise on board. There are some important matters that are taken on board, and I do look forward eventually to seeing the SOP that carries them through. But unfortunately, the ones that I've drawn attention to around the very wide powers that go to the executive, to the expense of this Parliament, and around appeal rights are not actioned. And that is going to be a problem, Mr Chairman,
I call
going
the
forward.
honourable member Charles Chauvel.
Sir, this, as I've said, is not the optimal bill, but it is better because of the insistence of the Labour Party on at least some sort of Select Committee process, so there could be at least some sort of input from persons who are not just persons in this chamber. It would have been better if there'd been more time, more notice, better public input, if we'd had officials' advice, something that wasn't available to us in the process, and if we'd had evidence that was presented to us, recorded and transcribed. But because of the way this was done, none of that was available. As I say, the bill's better because at least we did have that input. It could have been so much better if we'd had a better process. Now, having said that, I want to pay tribute to a number of people who did participate in the process to make the bill better than it otherwise would have been. And I want to start with the Clerk of the House. This was a really unusual procedure. We were blessed to have her guidance late at night, as it happened on Tuesday. And that guidance was extremely valuable, I think, to all members of the committee in terms of discharging their responsibilities. I do want to pay tribute to my Labour colleagues for the work that they did on the committee. They were diligent and careful in terms of their hearing of the evidence, and I reject the very unfortunate comments that were made by Louise Upston to the contrary. I actually expected better from that member because she did play an important and constructive role on the committee itself, but I would have thought she might have recognised that Labour members, in insisting on the process to start with and then participating fully in it, more than discharged their parliamentary responsibilities. I will say that the Chair did a good job in difficult circumstances, and I will say that ultimately, when we came to consider the production of a minority report, national members did recognise that their ultimate responsibilities lay with their roles as parliamentarians, and it is appropriate to put that on record. But I would also pay tribute to Heather Roy and Kennedy Graham. They were true respecters of such parliamentary process as we could have in the process, and it is valuable to record their contribution. Sarah, I'll say more about the detailed concerns that I have in a later point in the committee stage debate, particularly the dangers around the delegation of powers to the Minister and to the Executive by the Parliament. But meanwhile, I would just like to repeat my rejection of the words of Louise Upston in that second reading speech. Members on this side are not playing politics. If we were, we'd be voting against the bill. And as it is, we are voting for it at this point. That is our contribution to ensuring that there is the right thing done in Canterbury. But members on the other side shouldn't just expect that that's a blank cheque. And I'd just like to conclude my remarks by echoing something that was said earlier by Clayton Cosgrove. This is the model the government has chosen. We'll try to make it work, but as far as our concerns that it won't work as well as it might, and if the powers, the very wide powers that are conferred by it, are abused, then it's very clear where the responsibility for that failure to work and that abuse will lie.
Mr. Chairman. I call the Honourable